2 weeks after I announced my engagement to David, I should have been celebrating with brunch dates and dress shopping. Instead, I was standing in the parking lot of my office building at 6 p.m. on a Thursday, watching my cousin Melissa corner me like a detective who'd finally cracked a case. Melissa had been waiting by my car for who knows how long, leaning against the driver's side door with her arms crossed, and that calculating expression I'd learned to fear over the past 25 years of family gatherings. She didn't bother with small talk or explanation for why she was ambushing me after work. Her eyes immediately locked onto my right hand. I'm left-handed and wear my engagement ring on my right hand, a family tradition that goes back to my grandmother. "Let me see it," she demanded, not even pretending this was a friendly visit. I instinctively tucked my hand into my jacket pocket. I was wearing a simple silver band with a small emerald, David, and I had chosen something understated and meaningful rather than flashy. It was exactly the kind of thing Melissa would normally criticize as too plain or not impressive enough. But Melissa's radar for family secrets is legendary. She'd clearly heard something through the family network, and she wasn't leaving without confirmation. "See what?" I asked, trying to play innocent. "Don't play dumb with me, Emma," she snapped, stepping closer in a way that made my personal space feel violated. "Show me your hands. Now." Before I could react, she grabbed my right hand and yanked it out of my pocket, examining my ring like she was appraising jewelry for a pawn shop. Her face lit up with a mixture of triumph and something much darker when she saw the emerald catching the parking lot lights. "When did this happen?" she demanded, not letting go of my hand. My cousin Melissa is the kind of person who can turn Christmas dinner into a battlefield. She's 32 years old, but acts like a teenager who never learned that other people's happiness isn't a personal attack on her. Melissa has spent the last decade making every family celebration about her own drama, her own grievances, her own endless need for attention. And I was about to discover she wasn't done yet. Standing there in that parking lot, watching her examine my ring with that predatory expression, I knew with absolute certainty that my engagement had just become her latest obsession. The question wasn't whether she would try to destroy it. It was how creative she'd get in the process. Let me paint you the full picture of what growing up with Melissa in our extended family was like, because you need to understand the foundation of manipulation that led to this moment. Melissa is my father's sister's daughter, and she's 5 years older than me. Our families lived in the same small town, so we saw each other constantly, every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every family birthday party. As a kid, I looked up to her because she seemed so sophisticated and confident. As an adult, I realized that confidence was actually cruelty disguised as charisma. The pattern started when I was young. Melissa had this talent for finding your weak spots and pressing on them just hard enough to hurt, but not hard enough that adults would intervene. When I was excited about making the school play, she'd tell me I probably only got the part because they needed someone short. When I was proud of getting good grades, she'd remind me that book smart doesn't mean you're actually smart about real life. She was a master at delivering insults disguised as concern or advice, always with this tone that made you feel stupid for being hurt by it. But the real nightmare began when I was 22 and going through the worst period of my life. I was trapped in an emotionally abusive relationship with a guy named Trevor who had isolated me from most of my friends and controlled every aspect of my life. He monitored my phone, criticized my appearance constantly, and had convinced me that I was lucky he was willing to put up with someone like me. I was working as a night shift security guard because Trevor said day jobs would give me too many opportunities to cheat on him. I was exhausted, depressed, and barely functioning. I was desperate enough to reach out to family for help, thinking maybe Melissa would understand what it was like to struggle with relationships since she'd had her own share of boyfriend drama over the years. Melissa seemed sympathetic when I talked to her about Trevor's behavior. She'd nod in all the right places, make understanding noises, ask follow-up questions that made me think she was really listening. "That sounds really hard," she'd say. "You deserve better than that." I thought maybe, finally, my older cousin would step up and help me when I needed support most. Instead, she was busy spreading a different story to the rest of our family. While I was trying to escape an abusive situation, Melissa was telling everyone that I was being dramatic, and probably exaggerating, because I always need to be the center of attention. She convinced several family members that Trevor was actually a nice guy who was just trying to help Emma get her life together. "Emma's always been a little unstable," she told our grandmother. She probably misunderstood some normal relationship conversations and turned them into this whole victim story. She was systematically undermining my credibility while pretending to be supportive to my face. When I finally managed to break up with Trevor and move back in with my parents temporarily, several family members treated me like I'd overreacted and hurt a perfectly nice boy for no reason. The worst part? Melissa knew Trevor was abusive. I had shown her text messages where he called me worthless, told her about incidents where he'd destroyed my belongings during arguments, explained how he wouldn't let me see friends without his supervision. She knew I wasn't exaggerating or being dramatic. But the Emma is unstable and attention-seeking narrative was more useful to her. It meant she didn't have to actually provide emotional support, and it positioned her as the rational, level-headed cousin who could see through my manipulation tactics. It took months of therapy and the support of a few close friends to rebuild my self-confidence after that betrayal. But I never forgot how Melissa had actively worked to isolate me when I was most vulnerable. After that, I kept my distance from Melissa at family events. I'd be polite but surface level, sharing nothing important about my life with her. 3 years later, Melissa went through her own relationship crisis when her long-term boyfriend cheated on her. Suddenly, she remembered that I existed and might be useful for emotional support. "I know we haven't talked much lately, but I really need someone to talk to," she said when she called me crying. Despite our history, I felt bad for her and agreed to meet for coffee. I thought maybe shared experience with relationship trauma might help us connect as adults. The conversation lasted 2 hours, and Melissa spent exactly 3 minutes asking how I was doing before launching into a detailed monologue about her cheating ex-boyfriend. She wanted advice, sympathy, validation, and someone to agree with her that all men were terrible. When I tried to share my own experiences or offer perspective, she'd cut me off with, "But that's different," or "You don't understand because you've never been cheated on." By the end of the coffee date, I realized nothing had changed. Melissa still saw me as a supporting character in her personal drama, not as a whole person with my own experiences and insights. This pattern continued for years. Melissa would reach out when she needed something, advice about jobs, someone to complain to about family drama, help moving apartments, but she was mysteriously unavailable when I needed support. When I started my master's degree program while working full-time, Melissa never asked how it was going or offered any encouragement. When I got promoted to a management position at work, she didn't congratulate me. When I was dealing with my grandfather's death, she was too busy with her own social life to attend the funeral. But Melissa always expected me to drop everything for her crises. 2 years ago, when she was going through a particularly messy breakup, she called me at 2 a.m. demanding I come over immediately because she was having a panic attack and needed someone there. I got dressed, drove across town, and spent 4 hours listening to her rant about her ex-boyfriend. When she finally calmed down, she didn't even thank me for coming, just said she was tired and I should probably go home. 6 months later, when I had food poisoning and asked if she could pick up some medicine from the pharmacy for me, she said she was too busy, but suggested I try ordering delivery. The final straw came 8 months ago, during our grandfather's 85th birthday party. Our grandfather, my dad's father, so Melissa's grandfather too, had been battling cancer for several months. The whole family knew his time was limited, and this birthday party was likely one of our last chances to celebrate him while he was still relatively healthy. The party was at my aunt's house, and everyone was making an effort to keep things positive and focused on Grandpa. We were sharing favorite memories, looking through old photo albums, just trying to make the day special for him. Melissa arrived 3 hours late, dramatically bursting through the front door with tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she announced to the entire room. "I just found out that Jason is engaged to that girl he was cheating on me with." Jason was the ex-boyfriend she'd broken up with over a year earlier. His engagement had nothing to do with our grandfather's birthday party, but Melissa had managed to make it the center of attention within 30 seconds of arriving. She spent the next hour crying loudly, requiring multiple family members to comfort her and reassure her that she was better off without him. Our grandfather's birthday party became the Melissa sympathy show, complete with dramatic declarations about how she'd never trust men again and how unfair life was to her. My grandfather, who was exhausted from his cancer treatments, ended up cutting his own birthday celebration short because the energy had become so negative and draining. That was the moment I realized Melissa wasn't just self-centered, she was actively destructive to family harmony. She couldn't stand not being the center of attention, even at someone else's birthday party, even when that someone was a dying elderly man who just wanted to celebrate with his family. But what happened next revealed the true depths of her selfishness. 3 months later, our grandfather passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by family. It was sad but not unexpected, and we all took comfort in knowing he'd lived a full life and died with dignity. The funeral planning brought out the worst in several family members, but Melissa was in a category of her own. Her first concern wasn't grief or honoring Grandpa's memory, it was whether she was mentioned in his will. "Did Grandpa leave me anything?" she asked my aunt literally 10 minutes after we'd gotten the call that he'd passed away. When she found out that Grandpa had left small monetary gifts to all his grandchildren equally, she complained that it wasn't enough considering how close they'd been. Never mind that she'd barely visited him during his illness, or that she'd turned his last birthday party into her personal therapy session. At the funeral, she wore a bright red dress that was completely inappropriate for the occasion, claiming it was Grandpa's favorite color, and she wanted to celebrate his life. Then she spent the reception talking loudly about her dating life to anyone who would listen, completely oblivious to the fact that people were trying to share quiet memories of our grandfather. Several family members approached me afterward to ask if Melissa was okay, because her behavior had been so strange and inappropriate. That funeral was my final confirmation that Melissa was incapable of considering anyone's needs but her own, even in the most solemn and sacred family moments. Fast forward to 2 months ago, when David proposed to me during a weekend camping trip in the mountains. He'd hidden the ring in my hiking backpack and proposed at sunrise from our favorite overlook. It was perfect, intimate, and completely us. No big production, just 2 people in love making a commitment to each other surrounded by the natural beauty we both cherish. We spent the weekend hiking, making s'mores, and talking about our future. David is a park ranger, and I work in environmental consulting, so we share this deep love of nature that makes us perfect adventure partners. Our relationship has always been built on shared values, genuine friendship, and quiet contentment rather than drama or intensity. When we got back home, we started making wedding plans. The decisions came easily because David and I are naturally aligned on what matters to us. We decided to have a small ceremony at the botanical gardens where we had our first date, followed by a reception at the community center in my hometown. We wanted something intimate, affordable, and focused on celebrating with the people who genuinely supported our relationship. After making our guest list, we came up with about 70 people total: immediate family, close friends, a few colleagues we were genuinely close to, everyone who'd been part of our love story in some meaningful way. But there was one person we immediately agreed we did not want there: Melissa. "She'll find a way to make the whole day about herself," David said, and he was absolutely right. We both knew Melissa well enough to predict exactly what she'd do at our wedding. She'd show up late and make a dramatic entrance. She'd monopolize conversations with guests about her own relationship problems. She'd probably get drunk and cause some kind of scene during the reception. "I want our wedding to be peaceful and happy," I told David. "I don't want to spend my wedding day managing Melissa's emotional needs or cleaning up whatever drama she creates." My plan was straightforward. Don't send her an invitation. When she inevitably asked why she wasn't invited, I'd tell her honestly that we wanted to keep the celebration small and intimate. David and I decided to keep our engagement relatively quiet initially while we got our bearings and made some basic plans. We told our immediate families and closest friends, but we weren't ready for a big family announcement yet. We wanted to enjoy the private joy for a while before dealing with everyone else's opinions and expectations. But Melissa has this supernatural ability to sniff out family news, especially if it might somehow affect her or give her something to be dramatic about. The ambush happened exactly 2 weeks after David proposed. I was leaving work, tired after a long day of reviewing environmental impact reports, when I saw Melissa leaning against my car in the parking lot like she'd been waiting there for hours. She didn't waste time with pleasantries or explanations for why she was stalking me at my workplace. "I heard something interesting from your mom," she said, crossing her arms and giving me that interrogating stare I remembered from childhood. "Oh," I tried to play casual, but my heart rate immediately spiked. "Show me your hands," she demanded. I tried to keep my right hand in my pocket, but Melissa was persistent. She literally grabbed my wrist and pulled my hand out, examining my engagement ring like she was conducting a forensic investigation. When she saw the emerald ring, which had belonged to David's grandmother and meant more to us than any expensive diamond ever could, her expression shifted into something between excitement and calculation. "When did this happen?" she demanded, still holding onto my hand. I realized lying would be pointless. "David proposed 2 weeks ago," I said simply. Immediately, Melissa launched into interrogation mode. "When's the wedding?" "We're thinking next fall." "Where?" "The Botanical Gardens, probably." "What kind of reception?" "Something small at the community center." "How many people?" "We're keeping it intimate. Maybe 70 people." I was trying to give minimal information, hoping she'd lose interest quickly. But I could practically see the gears turning in her head with every answer. Her response should have been my first warning. "Oh, how nice for you. You know, I've been thinking about getting engaged too. My boyfriend Ryan has been hinting about it for months." This was news to me. Melissa had been dating Ryan for about 8 months, and from what I'd heard through family gossip, things were casual and non-committal. He was a nice enough guy, but he'd never struck me as someone ready to settle down, and Melissa had never mentioned marriage as something she was interested in pursuing with him. But looking back, that was the moment she started planning her sabotage. Over the next few weeks, family dynamics became complicated in a different way. Our grandfather's death had brought some family tensions to the surface, and there were ongoing disputes about settling his estate and organizing family gatherings without his unifying presence. Melissa started inserting herself into these family discussions more aggressively, positioning herself as a voice of reason and family unity. She was suddenly very interested in maintaining family traditions and making sure everyone felt included in important events. It was during one of these family dinners that she finally asked the question I'd been dreading. "So Emma, am I invited to your wedding?" Melissa asked casually, like she was asking about the weather. The whole dinner table went quiet. My parents looked uncomfortable. My aunt glanced nervously between Melissa and me. "We're keeping the guest list really small," I said diplomatically. "Just immediate family and very close friends." "But I'm family," Melissa said with a fake sweet smile. "I'm your cousin. We grew up together. It's going to be a very intimate ceremony," I explained. "We're trying to keep it to people we see regularly and who are actively part of our lives." Melissa's smile tightened. "So you're saying I'm not actively part of your life?" I could have backed down and given her what she wanted to avoid conflict. But I was tired of managing Melissa's feelings at the expense of my own boundaries. "That's correct," I said clearly. "We're not close, and I don't want the stress of wondering what drama you might create on my wedding day." The table went completely silent. Melissa looked genuinely shocked, like this possibility had never occurred to her. "That's incredibly hurtful," she said, her voice getting louder. "I can't believe you would exclude family from your wedding over some imaginary grudge." "It's not imaginary," I replied calmly. "You turned Grandpa's birthday party into your personal therapy session 3 hours after arriving. You spent his funeral reception talking about your dating life. I don't trust you to prioritize anyone else's important moments over your own need for attention." Melissa tried to start an argument, looking around the table for support from other family members. But everyone had witnessed her behavior at those events, and nobody was willing to defend it. That dinner ended with Melissa storming out in a huff, declaring that she was hurt and disappointed by my selfishness, and that she needed time to process how cruel I was being to her. I felt good about finally stating my boundaries clearly, even though the confrontation had been uncomfortable. I thought maybe Melissa would accept reality and we could all move forward. I had no idea she was already planning her retaliation. The explosion came during planning for our family's annual 4th of July barbecue, and it revealed just how far Melissa was willing to go in her war against my happiness. My aunt hosts this barbecue every year at her lake house, and it's traditionally been one of our most relaxed and enjoyable family gatherings. Everyone brings something to share, we spend the day swimming and playing games, and we watch fireworks over the water in the evening. This year, my aunt asked me to help coordinate the planning since I'm good at organizing events. I started a group text with all the cousins to figure out who was bringing what food and to coordinate timing for activities. Everyone was enthusiastic and cooperative about the planning, except Melissa. "I might not be able to make it this year," she wrote in the group chat. "I have a lot going on that weekend." "What do you have going on?" my younger cousin Jake asked. "The 4th is still 6 weeks away. I just have some important personal things to handle," Melissa replied vaguely. "I'm not sure I can commit to family events right now given how unwelcoming certain family members have been to me lately." This was clearly directed at me, and everyone in the chat knew it. But instead of taking the bait, everyone just moved on with planning the barbecue. I decided to try to be the bigger person and sent Melissa a private message. "If you want to talk about the wedding situation, we can do that privately. But I hope you'll still come to the barbecue. It won't be the same without you." I genuinely meant it. Despite our history, Melissa was still family, and I didn't want our conflict to ruin family traditions for everyone else. Her response revealed just how deep her resentment went. "You can't just exclude me from your wedding and then pretend everything is fine," she wrote back. "You humiliated me in front of the entire family by telling me I'm not actively part of your life. Do you have any idea how that felt?" "I didn't mean to humiliate you," I replied. "I was just trying to be honest about why we're keeping the guest list small." "Honest," she shot back. "You were being cruel. You could have just said you were having a tiny wedding and left it at that. Instead, you chose to attack my character and make me look like a bad person in front of everyone." "I wasn't attacking your character. I was explaining my decision based on past behavior that everyone at that table witnessed. What past behavior? Name one time I've ever ruined anyone's event. I couldn't believe she was asking that question seriously. Grandpa's birthday party, where you turned the whole thing into a breakdown about your ex-boyfriend. His funeral, where you wore a bright red dress and talked about dating throughout the reception. I was grieving, she wrote. I'm sorry my grief didn't look the way you wanted it to. I'm sorry I needed support from my family during difficult times. The gaslighting was masterful. She was reframing her attention-seeking behavior as legitimate grief responses and my boundary setting as cruel judgment of her emotional needs. The conversation continued to escalate, with Melissa accusing me of being jealous of her, holding grudges over childhood nonsense, and trying to turn the family against her. Every attempt I made to explain my perspective was met with more accusations and victim playing. Finally, she sent me one last message. Fine, have your precious little wedding without me. But don't expect me to pretend everything is normal between us afterward. Some things can't be forgiven. And then she blocked me. But Melissa wasn't done. She had one final card to play, and it was the most transparent act of spite I'd ever witnessed. 2 weeks after our text fight, she made a dramatic announcement at the next family dinner. She and Ryan were engaged, and they were planning to get married in August, exactly 1 month before my wedding. Not only that, but she was copying several key elements of my wedding plans with almost comedic precision. I was having my ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. Melissa was having hers at the Rose Garden across town. I was wearing my grandmother's vintage lace dress. Melissa was suddenly interested in vintage-inspired wedding fashion and had found a 1960s dress at an estate sale. I was having a small, intimate celebration focused on family and close friends. Melissa was also keeping things intimate and meaningful, rather than having a big production. I was serving comfort food and local specialties at my reception. Melissa was planning a menu of homestyle favorites and regional cuisine. The timeline made her motivations obvious. Ryan and Melissa had been dating for less than a year, with no previous engagement discussions that anyone in the family had heard about. But suddenly, right after being excluded from my wedding, Melissa was desperate to get married immediately. The most telling detail was that she scheduled her wedding for exactly 1 month before mine. Close enough to steal attention from my wedding planning, but far enough in advance to ensure she got married first. It was the most blatant anything you can do, I can do better situation I'd ever witnessed, disguised as romantic spontaneity. Several family members reached out to me privately to express concern about the situation. This seems really rushed, my aunt said carefully. Are you sure Melissa and Ryan are ready for marriage? They've only been together 8 months. It does feel like she's trying to compete with you, my mom admitted. The timing is very strange. But publicly, everyone felt obligated to be supportive of Melissa's engagement, even if they had private doubts about her motivations. I decided to take the high road and focus on my own wedding planning. I congratulated Melissa on her engagement, wished her well, and refused to engage with the obvious competition she was trying to create. But I did warn my wedding vendors about the situation. I explained to my photographer, florist, and caterer that my cousin was planning a similar wedding around the same time, and that she had a history of creating drama. I wanted to make sure she couldn't sabotage my actual wedding by interfering with my vendors. The vendors were understanding and professional. We see family competition more often than you'd think, my wedding photographer said. Don't worry, we'll make sure your day stays focused on you and David. Now, 6 months later, the karmic justice has been swift, brutal, and deeply satisfying to witness. Melissa's rushed wedding was exactly the disaster everyone predicted, though she's tried to present it publicly as a fairy tale romance. The engagement itself was awkward and forced. According to family gossip, Melissa basically gave Ryan an ultimatum. After my engagement announcement, propose immediately or she'd break up with him. Ryan, who's a conflict-avoidant person by nature, went along with it rather than deal with the drama of refusing. But you could see the strain in every interaction leading up to their wedding. Ryan looked confused and overwhelmed at their engagement party. He seemed uncomfortable when Melissa would gush about wedding plans in public. Friends who knew them as a couple started asking mutual acquaintances if everything was okay, because the sudden rush to marriage seemed so out of character for both of them. The wedding itself was a hollow performance designed to upstage mine, and everyone could see through it. Melissa had copied so many elements from my plans that her wedding felt like a tribute band version of someone else's vision. Nothing seemed authentic to her personality or her relationship with Ryan. She'd insisted on vintage lace like my grandmother's dress, but she looked uncomfortable and unlike herself in the style. She'd chosen the Rose Garden because it seemed more impressive than the Botanical Gardens, but she's allergic to several types of roses and spent her ceremony sneezing and watery-eyed. She'd planned comfort food like my menu, but Ryan is a vegetarian, and half her guests couldn't eat most of what she'd ordered. Multiple family members mentioned afterward that something felt off about the whole celebration. It was technically beautiful and well-planned, but it lacked the joy and authenticity that makes weddings meaningful. More importantly, the marriage itself has been struggling from day one. Ryan had been pressured into a commitment he wasn't ready for, and the resentment was obvious almost immediately. They went on their honeymoon to Costa Rica, a trip that Ryan had been planning as a solo adventure before Melissa decided they should turn it into a romantic getaway. Ryan spent the week looking miserable in all their social media photos while Melissa posed dramatically for Instagram shots that screamed, "Look how happy we are." Within 3 months of the wedding, people started noticing that Ryan and Melissa rarely appeared together at social events anymore. When they did attend things together, they seemed to barely interact with each other. The final blow came 4 months ago when Ryan moved out of their shared apartment, claiming he needed space to think about their relationship. Melissa has been presenting this as a temporary separation while we work through some communication issues. But everyone knows the marriage is over. Ryan has been staying with friends and reportedly told several people that he felt manipulated into marriage and regrets not standing up for himself when Melissa pressured him to propose. Meanwhile, Melissa is facing the consequences of burning bridges with our family over the wedding situation. She isolated herself from most of our relatives with her dramatic victim playing and accusations about being excluded and unsupported. Now that her rushed marriage is falling apart, she doesn't have the family network she destroyed to lean on for support. She's been trying to reconnect with family members lately, calling people she hadn't spoken to in months, and acting like nothing happened. But most everyone remembers how she treated them during her wedding drama phase, and they're not eager to get pulled back into her emotional chaos. As for me, David and I had the most perfect wedding celebration I could have imagined. Our ceremony at the Botanical Gardens was intimate, meaningful, and filled with genuine joy. The weather was perfect, the flowers were in full bloom, and everyone there had a real reason for celebrating our love. David's vows made me cry happy tears, and my vows made him laugh at all the right moments. Our reception was everything I dreamed of: comfort food, local beer, live bluegrass music, and dancing under string lights as the sun set. Everyone there was genuinely happy to be celebrating with us, sharing stories about our relationship and toasting our future together. The best part was the complete absence of drama. Without Melissa there to create chaos or demand attention, our wedding day stayed focused on what mattered: David and me, our love for each other, and the community of people who support our relationship. Every photo from our wedding shows real smiles, authentic laughter, and genuine celebration. I can't imagine how different the energy would have been if Melissa had been there, turning our special day into another episode of her personal drama series. Looking back, Melissa did me the biggest favor of my life by cutting herself out of it. Her absence wasn't a loss. It was a gift that allowed our wedding to be everything we wanted it to be. 6 months later, David and I are happier than ever. We're settled into married life, planning a garden in our backyard, talking about the future with excitement and confidence. Our relationship is built on friendship, shared values, and mutual respect, none of which can be shaken by external drama or family conflicts. Meanwhile, Melissa is dealing with the consequences of choosing spite over authenticity. She forced her boyfriend into a marriage neither of them was ready for, copied someone else's wedding vision instead of creating her own, and isolated herself from family support in pursuit of petty revenge. She thought she was punishing me by getting married first and stealing my ideas. Instead, she revealed her own emotional emptiness to everyone who was watching and trapped herself in a failing marriage that began as competition rather than love. The final lesson? Authenticity always wins over imitation, and genuine relationships survive external pressure while forced ones crumble. Melissa didn't ruin my wedding. She wasn't important enough to affect it. She exposed her own character flaws, destroyed her own relationships, and created her own isolation through her choices. Meanwhile, I'm living my best life with a partner who married me because he loves me, surrounded by family and friends who choose to be in our lives because they want to celebrate our happiness, not because they feel obligated or want something from us. The woman who tried to compete with my joy is now dealing with the emptiness of a life built on spite and imitation. But the authentic love and genuine connections David and I have built together, those keep growing stronger every day.